Okay, gang, this is a little bit of my technique on how I install landing gear blocks and do fuel compartment, fuel proofing and all that jazz. Um, this is a SIG something extra that I just started, I think yesterday or something like that. This will be very true for this plane, obviously, and very similar on the 4-star series in the SIG things like that. And certainly these ideas can be applied to any plane, but this is how I kind of bulletproof my landing gear block so it doesn't rip out of the plane. Um, on the something extra, which I know guys are real worried about weight on this one, but I don't believe it adds that much weight, and I certainly remove enough elsewhere to redo it. There is one piece of triangle stock that is basically there inside that helps support that block, which I don't think is nearly enough, and I think most of the something extra guys will tell you that that's a weak point for this plane. So what I do is I actually add in triangle stock where it's recommended, and then on each side as well. But then I go a step further, and this works really well for me. I actually put in a couple layers of pretty light fiberglass in there. I do a strip of like about 1-inch wide, 6-ounce cloth first, and then I wet that out real good, and then I put that down. And then I put in two, I think like 1.25 ounce layers on top of that, which is probably overkill. And I run it up about 50 to 75% up the side of the fuselage, and then I also take a piece and wrap it up over that front triangle, just into that front bulkhead, and that seems to really hold on to things. A couple of tips when you're doing the glassing is you'll see there's 3 little blue squares on top of the blind nuts, which are underneath the glass and the resin. That's just a little bit of painter's tape, and I put that on there first so that I don't have epoxy resin dripping down through and gumming up the threads, making my life a little more difficult later on when I go to mount the landing gear in place. So just a little square tape in there, forget about it, leave it there. If your bolts are too long, you can drill it through from this side with a Dremel, or just a real kind of oversized drill, kind of chamfer it out without getting the threads and messing it up or anything like that. So whatever glass you have around will probably work for this. Epoxy, my preference is something that flows out real nice, and I use Wet Systems. I only had the 207 hardener because it's clear, and I use that for other applications. I'll show you what I use that for in the other methods. But basically that block goes in, the glass goes on, it's all wetted out with 105 and 207, and I do mine by weight. I don't use the measured pumps that West System offers because it's just way too much for any given application. So as long as I'm taking these two, which I believe is a 3-to-1 ratio with that particular hardener, and it does matter, each hardener is different, so make sure you're checking the label as well if you're using West Systems. But I do them in little Dixie cups or whatever, so I can do 15, 20 grams at a time, so it's not a boatload of epoxy that I'm wasting, because as we all know, the stuff isn't cheap. So while I'm doing that on this plane and on the 4-star that I built recently, I also go ahead and use that same epoxy because it's real thin. It's a thin stuff. It's meant for wetting out glass and finishing. I do the fuel compartment, the fuel tank compartment. I do that first before I drop in the tray that the fuel tank sets on. So I get the whole thing first, because when that's in the way, it's kind of a pain in the butt to do and to keep getting epoxy evenly coated throughout that compartment, so we don't have any issues down the road should we get a fuel tank leak. So I do that first, and then I do the bottom side of the tray, and I drop it in and I clamp it up, and then I epoxy the top of the tray, and that same epoxy holds the tray then in place all the way around, so I'm kind of gluing it and fuel proofing it all at the same time. And I also did add a piece of triangle stock on the front of that bulkhead too, so I'm really sturdy on that. And all I can say is my landing gear don't come out. I'll bend the gear or break it, which I'd rather replace landing gear than glue my plane back together, is basically what it comes down to, because over the long run, you keep gluing and gluing and gluing, you're adding weight. It's never as strong as it was. So I just build them this way first, and it saves me a whole lot of time and trouble down the road. So I'm not dealing with breakages and that. And because I usually have enough resin mixed up, that's why I tend to do the fuel tank compartment and the fuel tank tray and that all at the same time. So everything's all said and done when that gets to that point. So anyways, that's just a little snippet on how I do that. Again, nothing I say is gospel. It's just my methods, what has worked for me over the years and keeps my planes in good working order. And that's it. If you have any comments, tips, or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I look forward to doing more videos and trying to grow this thing a little bit to kind of keep our building side of the hobby going, as it's something that I have a lot of passion for and I enjoy doing. So I hope to share my knowledge with you all and hopefully learn some things along the way too. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.